Most people are still trying to control the world instead of their perception of it. If your inner voice is always drowned out by the expectations, judgments, and demands of others, you're not really living your life. You're performing someone else's version of it. And performance is exhausting. It's not sustainable. It's also not strategic. Clarity allows you to choose where your energy goes. You no longer feel the need to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't jump to fix every problem, explain every decision, or justify every change. You begin to understand that most noise is not an emergency. It's just distraction. And when you live in distraction long enough, confusion becomes your default. You start doubting what you already know. You start second-guessing your intuition. You start asking questions you've already answered just because someone else doesn't like your answer. Distance is how you take that power back, not by withdrawing from the world entirely, but by withdrawing your urgency to be understood by it. You're not here to be available to everyone's emotions. You're not here to carry the weight of every room you walk into. You're here to move with clarity, to see what's yours to carry and what isn't, to discern when to speak and when silence is the wiser choice. As you step into this way of living, something subtle shifts in how you experience conflict. You stop seeing it as something to fix and start seeing it as information. Not everything needs resolution. Some things just need space. Some people just need time, and some problems aren't yours to solve. That kind of clarity protects your energy. It protects your time. It keeps you aligned with your direction, not distracted by detours that don't lead anywhere worth going. This is the difference between movement and momentum. Anyone can be busy, anyone can make noise, but those who move with purpose, who act with intention, who build with vision, they do so from a place of inner stillness. And stillness can only be accessed when you step away from the pull of emotional chaos. When you give yourself enough distance to remember what matters and what's just noise, the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. You'll find yourself responding slower, but with more weight. You'll feel the urge to speak and choose silence instead. You'll notice patterns in others you used to miss. You'll see opportunities before they arrive and threats before they're fully formed. Because distance gives you foresight. And foresight isn't magic. It's just the reward of patience. You won't always get it right. Sometimes you'll still act on emotion, still get pulled into the storm, still say something you regret or move too fast. But even then, the distance you've trained yourself to hold will shorten the damage. You'll recover faster. You'll return to center with less friction because the mind that's practiced in clarity doesn't stay lost for long. And as this clarity deepens, you'll notice another change. You stop explaining yourself. You stop needing to. You understand that clarity doesn't need validation. It doesn't beg to be understood. It simply stands unshaken. And in that stillness, you become a mirror. The people around you will feel it. Some will be drawn to it, others will be unnerved by it. But either way, they will respect it, because the world respects what it cannot shake. That's the power of distance. It's not isolation, it's alignment. It's not detachment, it's discernment. It's the space where you remember who you are without the world constantly trying to tell you who you should be. It's where you refine your focus, strengthen your boundaries, and reclaim your voice. In that space, control becomes simple, not because you dominate everything around you, but because you've mastered the only thing you ever needed to, yourself. And from that mastery, clarity flows quietly, relentlessly, without force, without noise, just presence, just power, just peace. Most people see leadership as a performance, a role you step into once others decide you're ready, a set of traits, charisma, confidence, command, that suddenly appear the moment the spotlight hits. But real leadership doesn't begin when the world starts listening. It begins long before that, in the silence. In the moments when no one's watching, when there's no applause, no confirmation, no one telling you you're on the right path. That's when the mask of leadership is forged, not as a deception, but as a layer of resilience. Not something to hide behind, but something that holds you together. When everything around you is uncertain, you don't just wake up one day and lead. You build yourself into someone who can hold that weight. And that building happens privately, in doubt, in frustration, in decisions you have to make without consensus or validation. The first person you have to convince is yourself, not with words, but with action, with consistency, with your ability to keep going. When everything inside you wants to give up. Leadership is tested most in the absence of recognition, when there's no one to tell you that you're doing well, and yet you move forward anyway. What many don't realize is that strength in leadership is rarely loud. It doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to dominate a room. Often it just stands still, not because it doesn't feel the pressure, but because it's learned not to be ruled by it. The people who lead with quiet strength have already fought their biggest battles, not in public, but in private. They've wrestled with doubt in empty rooms. They've sat with failure when no one else knew they were breaking. And through that process, they built something unshakable inside, something that doesn't flinch when the world turns cold. You begin to understand that leadership is less about being followed and more about being rooted, about knowing who you are when everything familiar is gone, when those who once supported you change direction, when the outcome is unclear and the pressure mounts. That's when the inner voice has to be louder than the noise, not louder in volume, but louder in conviction. The kind of conviction that isn't dependent on results or praise. The kind that lives in the actions you take when doubt is screaming in your ear. Carl Jung once said, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, it will tell you." That is the essence of private leadership, knowing yourself before the world tries to define you, building your foundation so strong that you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to prove your worth, you just embody it. And that embodiment comes through 1,000 quiet choices. The choice to get up when it's easier to stay down. The choice to act with integrity when compromise would be more convenient. The choice to remain steady when everything inside you feels unstable. When you lead from that place, you stop needing to be the loudest in the room. You stop needing to explain your every move. You realize that power isn't in the display, it's in the discipline. And discipline doesn't grow in public, it grows in silence, in solitude, in the boring, relentless repetition of doing the right thing without anyone noticing. Most people won't see it, they'll only see the outcome, the title, the speech, the presence. But those are just the surface. The real weight is carried in private, long before the world decides to listen. It's in those private moments that the mask becomes necessary. Not as a lie, but as a structure, a way of keeping yourself focused when the emotions rise. A tool to keep your doubt from leaking into your decisions. It's not about hiding who you are. It's about protecting what you've built from being shaken by every breeze. Because the truth is, even when you're strong, you're not immune to fear. You're not exempt from insecurity. You just don't let it dictate your next move. That's what the mask helps you do. Hold your ground long enough for clarity to return. And with time, that mask becomes less about hiding and more about honoring your responsibility. You're not just leading for yourself anymore. People look to you in crisis. They borrow your calm when they have none. They watch how you move, how you speak, how you carry pressure. And what they need most isn't perfection. They need steadiness. A sense that even if everything else is crumbling, you won't. Not because you have all the answers, but because you know how to move through chaos without becoming it. This is why the strongest leaders are often misunderstood. Their silence is mistaken for aloofness. Their restraint is seen as indifference. But those who've worn the mask long enough understand that real power isn't about reaction. It's about regulation. They don't rise and fall with every win or loss. They move with rhythm, not reactivity. And that rhythm was practiced long before anyone saw it. Even now, if you're building something, if you're trying to lead your own life with purpose, the hardest part will always be believing in yourself. When there's no echo to reinforce your direction, when you're doubted, when your efforts are unseen, that's where you shape the version of you the world will later admire. Not on stage, not in spotlight, but in the dark. In the discipline, in the unwavering choice to keep going when no one claps. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often that praise and criticism are both meaningless noise. That what matters most is living in accordance with your values, regardless of what others say. That principle anchors real leadership. Not popularity, not visibility, but alignment. The kind of alignment that lets you move through fire and remain composed. That allows you to lose people without losing yourself. That gives you the strength to carry others without collapsing. Eventually, the world may catch up. They may begin to see the strength you've been cultivating all along. They may recognize your